Hi, I'm Jaya Ramji-Nogales, and I'm currently a professor at Temple Law School, where I teach refugee law and policy, and I also supervise a variety of student projects involving refugee and asylum law. I'm the child of immigrants. I grew up overseas, and so international law seemed like a natural fit, but I didn't really know what that meant until I got to law school. So I was lucky enough to have some great summer opportunities when I was in law school. I spent my first summer, I spent a lot of time exploring during my summers, actually. I spent half of my first summer in Cambodia working for the Documentation Center of Cambodia, which collected all of the documentation, nearly all of the documentation that was used for the Khmer Rouge prosecutions in the extraordinary chambers in the courts of Cambodia. I spent the second half of that summer in India doing human rights documentation work there. And then the next summer, I also did some human rights related work, but here in the US. I worked at a law firm for the first half of the summer, and there actually I did some international arbitration work. And then I worked at the ACLU for the second half of that summer. So I got a lot of opportunities during law school, both during the summers and actually during the semesters as well, because I was part both of the human rights clinic and of the asylum clinic. So I got a lot of opportunities to see what international law actually was and what it meant to be an international lawyer. So my first job in international law, I was lucky enough to get one of those rare human rights fellowships that sent me overseas. And so I spent 3 months in Uganda working with asylum seekers there and helping to set up legal aid services for asylum seekers in Kampala. And then I spent the rest of that year in Johannesburg, South Africa, working at the University of the Witwatersrand, helping them to set up a refugee law clinic there. So replicating some of the wonderful experiences I had in law school. So after the fellowship, I came back to New York, and it actually kind of replicated a little bit my summers. I spent then the next year or so at the international law firm of Debevoise and Plimpton in New York, where I had a wonderful opportunity to work in international arbitration. I also worked on some of the human rights cases that I cared about so much in law school, and actually I helped to run the pro bono asylum program. So I was fortunate enough to be able to keep up all of those interests and have really a robust and varied international law practice when I was at Debevoise. And I really enjoyed my time at Debevoise, but doing kind of pure human rights, civil rights work was closer to what I wanted to do. So it was too good an experience to turn down. So I then moved over to the ACLU, where I worked for another couple of years. So the ACLU work was actually largely domestic work. I spent the summer in the Immigrants' Rights Project. So there's a transnational dimension to that work. When I was at the ACLU in the national office, I was actually doing reproductive rights work. So it's kind of more classic civil rights work, but helping make these rights a reality on the ground. So I loved working at the ACLU, but I always suspected that I wanted to go into law teaching. So I applied for a fellowship at Georgetown, where you can spend 2 years supervising students who are representing asylum seekers. And I thought that was a great opportunity to figure out if law teaching was something I wanted to do, and to be able to maintain my practice experience at the same time. So I went to Georgetown and I loved it. And so I said, this is what I want to do. And I went on the law teaching market and have been at Temple ever since then. That was 12 or 13 years ago. So in terms of taking first steps, I think your career services office at your law school will be helpful. And if you're an undergraduate, talking to career services at your university can help you figure out what the options are. It also helps to get yourself out there. So the American Society of International Law actually offers a great opportunity to come and network with people and meet people and be able to send your resume to them, and they'll remember who you are. I remember some good advice that I received that I always also give to my students is just email people and ask if they'll have coffee with you. And some people won't respond at all, but some people will respond. And I actually sent an email to Arthur Hilton, who's a very, very well-known and beloved refugee lawyer. When I was I think when I was working at Debevoise, I was just out of law school. He had no idea who I was. And he was so lovely. And he said, come to my office and meet with me. And he sat and talked to me about what my path could look like and the different directions I could take. So you never know who in the field is going to respond and just be a lovely human being. So I think it's definitely worth being brave and reaching out to people and seeing what you come up with. So after that experience with Arthur Hilton, who's obviously a giant in the field of refugee law, I was delighted to be asked to sit on the Hilton Fellowship Committee. And every year, the society offers several fellowships to students interested in getting their start in human rights work. And that's a really good place to start. You can apply for funding. It can help you over the summer. It can help you for a few months. After law school. And for me, it's just a wonderful opportunity to be able to give back because Arthur Hilton was so generous to me at the beginning of my career.